There are some stories people only dare to tell on rainy nights, when the wind whistles through the cracks of a door, and the ticking of a clock feels like it's counting down to something. No one knows exactly when it began. They only know that in a small town in Taiwan, every year, at the same time, strange things happen, things no one can explain. The elders call it a promise from the other side. The younger ones laugh it off as a scary tale, until the night they happen to pass the narrow alley by the cemetery. Behind you, footsteps. Not hurried. Not slow. Just steady, keeping time with yours. You stop, the sound stops. You turn, nothing there. Then, a deep, raspy cough. So close you can feel someone's breath on the back of your neck. They say, if you linger too long when you turn around, you'll see her. A thin figure, hair long and soaked, clinging to her face. Her features hidden. She won't speak. She'll just reach out her hand, as if to take yours. Many have tried to walk that alley at night, but most can't make it halfway. That's when the cough changes, quickens, and you realize it's no longer coming from behind you. It's right next to your ear. I don't know if you believe what you've just heard, but tonight, I'll tell you the whole story. And when it's over, you might never want to walk alone on a rainy night again. To understand why one woman became the haunting shadow of an entire town, we have to go back in time. Back to when life was still calm, in a place where gray-tiled roofs layered like ocean waves. Its wooden doors weathered with age, but the locals would point and say, "That's the Lin family's house, the most traditional clan in town." The Lin family had been carpenters for generations, known for their skill and their integrity. In their household, a parent's word was law. Even grown children bowed their heads and obeyed. No one refused what was decided, especially when it came to marriage. The man at the center of this story, Lin Yachun, was the youngest son. Quiet, mild-mannered. His gaze often seemed to wander far beyond the present moment. He worked in the family's woodshop from dawn to dusk without complaint. Everyone liked him, for his honesty, his patience, and the way he let others take what they wanted, even when it was unfair. People used to joke that Yachun was as gentle as the pieces of wood he carved. But here, gentleness often meant others felt free to decide your fate for you. At 26, Yachun's parents arranged for him to marry Chen Ingha, the daughter of a family their clan had known for generations. Ingha was 4 years younger, praised for her looks and her charming way with words. Before the wedding, murmuring, "A good match." But what people see isn't always the truth. In this town's old tiled houses, the walls are thin. Not long after the wedding, neighbors began hearing arguments late at night. By day, Ingha kept her gentle mask in place, but behind the closed wooden gates, she was different. She rarely did housework, slept late, and often went out without saying where she was headed. Yachun endured it all, telling himself his wife just needed time to adjust to the family's way of life. The Lin family believed in protecting their honor. Marital problems stayed private. So even when his parents saw her faults, they kept silent. And Yachun bore it alone, hoping she would change. But in a small town, rumors travel faster than the first summer rain. People began whispering about seeing Ingha riding on the back of a strange man's motorbike, or leaving a jewelry shop with brand new gold, while Yachun still wore the same faded work clothes. The distance between them grew. Mealtimes became quiet, filled only with the clink of chopsticks. Yachun's shoulders seemed more stooped, his steps slower. That's when strange things began creeping into their lives, like a thin mist settling in the night. But back then, no one knew, it was only the beginning. In the early days of her marriage, Ingha still kept her sweet, obedient demeanor in front of her husband's family. She wore pale, long-sleeved blouses, her hair neatly pinned, and she always smiled warmly when greeting the elders. Every morning, she would step into the kitchen, lift the teapot, and pour tea for her in-laws, her voice so gentle that neighbors often praised her. Everyone said Yechun was lucky, blessed with a beautiful and respectful wife. But it was all a facade. The moment no one else was watching, Ingha's eyes changed. The softness vanished. Saying she was visiting friends, but never naming who or where. The grocery money her mother-in-law gave each week was never enough anymore, though it had always sufficed before. "A friend gave it to me." Her voice light, but her eyes daring him to push further. What first raised suspicion in the family were her evening outings. This was a small town, the streets dimly lit. Some even saw her on the back of his motorbike, her arms wrapped tight around his waist as they disappeared into the dark. Rumors began to spread, but when they reached the Lin family, they were quietly dismissed. In this place, the greatest fear was family shame. Ingha wasn't just good at pretending to be dutiful, she was skilled at turning every fault into someone else's mistake. If dinner was cold, she blamed Yechun for coming home late. If her mother-in-law gave her advice, she'd fake tears and claim she was being wronged. She could shift from sweet to sharp-tongued to fragile in the span of a few sentences. The medicine money relative sent was locked away, and she gave him just enough to buy cheap fever pills. Most of it went to herself, or quietly into the hands of that other man. Many times, Yechun lay coughing violently, calling for water, only to hear her cold voice from the other room, "Get it yourself. I'm busy." Neighbors told of seeing Yechun struggling alone to carry heavy bundles of wood home from the workshop, his face pale, sweat soaking through his shirt, while his wife sat on the porch eating pastries and chatting with a visitor. When asked why she didn't help, she laughed, "Men are supposed to be strong." In a place where people lived slowly and noticed every detail, Ingha's image began to shift. No one called her a good daughter-in-law anymore. Whispers behind her back carried far less kind words. But she didn't care. To Ingha, only two things mattered, money and her own freedom. As for her sickly husband, he was just a shadow in the quiet, gray-tiled house. 3 years after the wedding, the Lin family home no longer echoed with laughter at mealtimes. Now there was only the clink of chopsticks, the scrape of a spoon in thin rice porridge, and the wind slipping through the cracks in the door. No children had come into the family, a fact Ingha used as another weapon. When relatives asked, she would sigh, glance at Yechun, and murmur, "It must be his fault," light words, but enough to plant a lasting doubt. Yechun, already quiet, grew more withdrawn. He spent most of his time at the workshop, avoiding coming home early to escape her pointed remarks. But his health worsened. A winter cough lingered, first a few dry hacks, then deep fits that left his face drained of color. Still, he kept working, knowing that if he stopped, there'd be no money for medicine. Whenever he asked her for money, she'd frown, reminding him of all the other, important, expenses, saying the medicine could wait. His co-workers began to notice. Sometimes, they'd slip him a packet of herbal cigarettes or a few coins for Western medicine. But even those small amounts didn't last long. Once, when he left the money on the table, it was gone within hours. Ingha only said, "I borrowed it. I'll pay you back tomorrow." That tomorrow never came. By now, others swore they saw her hand him a stack of cash while her husband lay bedridden. Still, in the Lin household, the silence held. Yechun's aging parents didn't want their family disgrace laid bare. But cracks don't heal on their own. They deepen. The couple's bedroom felt like two separate worlds. One side, the bed, heavy with a woman's perfume. The other, a thin mat on the floor by the window, where Yechun could breathe easier during his coughing spells. Their eyes no longer met. When guests came, Ingha still smiled, still served tea. Yechun wasted away, bones sharp under skin, eyes sunken. Even bedridden, he received no care from his wife. She stayed out more, coming home at dawn with the smell of smoke and liquor in her hair. When her mother-in-law asked, she'd reply curtly, "I was with friends," and change the subject. In a small town, every secret has eyes watching. But in the Lin home, silence still smothered everything, the shame, the anger, the helplessness. Their marriage was no longer a home, just a cold house where two people lived together like strangers. His breathing was ragged, each cough blending with the wind outside. Every fit of coughing bent his thin frame, his bony hands clutching the thin blanket. Eyes squeezed shut as if bracing against a pain that cut straight through bone. The room was almost dark. The window had been boarded with an old wooden plank to keep the wind out, leaving only a thin slit where a pale light seeped through. On the table, the morning's bowl of porridge still sat untouched, its surface now covered with a thin film. He didn't have the strength to sit up, and no one bothered to ask if he had eaten. In the final days of his life, Ye-chun lived in near absolute silence. "I'm tired of this." Then she left, the harsh scent of her perfume mixing with the musty air in the room. His illness worsened on a night when rain poured like a relentless drumbeat on the gray-tiled roof. He tried to reach for the water bottle on the table, but his body was so weak the bottle only toppled and rolled away. Lying flat on his back, he stared at the stained ceiling, where the watermarks formed strange shapes in the darkness. Each shallow breath made him feel as though someone was standing in the corner, watching. He wanted to turn his head, but his neck felt impossibly heavy. And then, through the haze, he heard a hoarse cough, not his own, drifting from behind the thin wall. The next morning, his father opened the door carrying a fresh bowl of steaming porridge. He called his son's name. No answer. Ye-chun's body lay still, his eyes half closed, lips pale. One hand still gripped the blanket, his knuckles stiff and cold long before the morning came. The silence in the room was so heavy that even an old man used to grief found it hard to breathe. Setting the bowl down, he touched his son's shoulder, and understood. The sky was leaden gray, drizzle falling like ash. Throughout the ceremony, In-ha kept a blank face. She wore mourning clothes, head bowed, but her hands never shook, her eyes never reddened. People whispered that they'd never seen a wife so calm in front of her husband's coffin. At the burial in the family's hillside cemetery, Ye-chun's grave was marked only by a few bricks and a thin layer of cement. His parents planned to rebuild it properly one day, but deep down, they knew the money for that was already gone. The financial help relatives had sent for the funeral vanished overnight. And everyone silently understood where it went. That afternoon, the rain stopped, but the sky remained heavy and dark. From that day on, strange things began. Spring came late that year. The Qingming festival fell under a cold drizzle, fog wrapping the entire Lin family graveyard. The path up the hill was carpeted with rotting camphor leaves, each step releasing a soft, wet sound. As always, the family gathered to clean the graves. Though she was no longer Ye-chun's wife in spirit, In-ha still showed up. She wore a beige coat, a bright silk scarf, and heavy eyeliner, looking as though she had just come from a party. Not a memorial. Relatives exchanged glances but said nothing, though their eyes made it clear she was the last person they wanted to see there. The cemetery lay deep among ancient camphor trees. Rows of moss-covered tombstones with faded inscriptions. Ye-chun's grave was at the far end, near a crumbling stone wall. It was still a simple mound of earth with a small, hastily carved marker, tangled with wild grass. In-ha stepped up to it, her face unreadable. She placed a bouquet of white chrysanthemums, a flower she had never once brought him while he was alive. As the family bowed in prayer, a sudden gust of wind tore through, scattering burning paper offerings into the air. Incense smoke twisted into strange, shifting rings before her eyes. Before anyone could react, she screamed, eyes wide, fixed on the soil as if something were forcing its way up from beneath. Witnesses swore they saw her struggle, her left arm yanked hard, as though gripped by an unseen hand that wouldn't let go. On her pale wrist, dark purple marks began to bloom, the exact shape of Yechun's rough, calloused fingers from years of working wood. She shrieked, thrashing wildly, but the more she fought, the deeper the bruises grew, as though that invisible grip was tightening. It took several relatives to pull her free. Once she broke loose, she scrambled backward, collapsing onto the damp ground, gasping for air. Her eyes darted around in panic, searching for someone no one else could see. He's here, he's watching me," she whispered, trembling as if in a fever. When asked who, she stayed silent, biting her lip before burying her face into a relative's shoulder. The rest of the ceremony was tense, the elders muttering extra prayers, afraid Yechun's spirit had not found peace. Ingha kept her left wrist clutched tightly in her right hand all the way home, avoiding eye contact with anyone. That night, long after the household had gone to sleep, a neighbor claimed to hear unsteady footsteps and the creak of a door opening. Looking through a narrow gap in his shutters, he saw Ingha standing motionless in the yard. Her hair hung in rain-soaked tangles, her eyes locked on the direction of the cemetery. Even though there was no wind, the hem of her coat swayed gently, as if someone was holding it, from behind. And that was only the beginning of the nights she would never forget. And whenever she caught someone's gaze in the family, she would quickly turn away, avoiding contact. The strangest part was how she kept glancing over her shoulder, its scarred fingers locking tightly around her ankle. Ingha struggled, but the hand yanked hard, pulling her down face first into the foul-smelling muck. Before she was swallowed completely, she saw a familiar face, drenched, smiling, but no longer human. She woke with a start, her clothes damp with cold sweat. Breathing hard, she wiped her forehead, and froze. The bruises on her left wrist from the cemetery were still there, as clear as ever. She tried to convince herself it was just a dream, but then came the sound. That hoarse, ragged cough, rising from the dark corner of the room. Her blood turned to ice. She turned her head. The corner was empty, but the faint scent of damp wood from Yechun's workshop hung heavy in the air. The yard was empty, save for long, wet trails leading from the gate straight to her doorstep. At first she thought it was someone's cruel prank, until one night, when she cracked the door and saw them, bare footprints, bony and mud-caked, the nails jagged and splintered, as though they had just stepped out of a grave. Yechun's cough became clearer with each passing day. Sometimes it came from right behind her as she washed her face, other times from beneath her bed in the middle of the night. Once, as the Dragon Boat Festival drew near, everything escalated. One night, neighbors heard her scream. Rushing over, they found Ingha sitting on the floor, her back pressed against the wall, eyes wide with terror. Her voice trembled. He's right there," he said, "it's not over." But when they searched the room, it was empty, save for the flicker of an oil lamp trembling in the draft. Her former mother-in-law came to visit, and saw it. Standing across the room, she watched as a deep red mark slowly rose on Ingha's arm, as if an unseen hand were gripping it tight. Ingha hadn't moved an inch. The feeling of being watched never left her, not even in the bath. She could feel cold eyes fixed on her back. Water ran down her spine, but mixed with it was something else, the sensation of icy fingers trailing along her vertebrae. She shot upright, wrapping a towel around herself. The ceiling light flickered, then died. In that instant, the cough returned, this time, directly beside her ear. By then, relatives were whispering that Yechun's spirit had not moved on, that he had come back for revenge. But Ingha didn't care about rumors anymore. When night fell, she had only one desperate wish, for the sun to rise quickly. That night, there was no moon. Preparations were underway for the morning, when they would pack up Ingha's things and send her away. No one was there. A cold draft swept in, carrying the scent of damp wood, and the earthy stench of the grave. She slammed the door shut, backing toward the bed, just as the mirror on her vanity began to tremble. Then it tilted forward, revealing a gaunt, dripping face staring back at her from directly behind. She screamed, pressing herself against the wall. But before she could react, something yanked her violently forward, throwing her to the floor. Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway, growing louder. Then the door burst open and relatives rushed in, only to freeze in shock. Ingha was crawling across the floor as if dragged by her hair, her clothes disheveled, her eyes wild. She screamed over and over. "Let me go. Don't touch me. What do you want?" In front of everyone, she was flung sideways, her shoulder slamming into a wooden cabinet. It rattled violently, sending objects crashing to the floor. Red marks bloomed on her arms and neck, the shape of a man's large hand squeezing hard. She clawed her way toward the door, but it slammed shut on its own. From the dark corner came that same hoarse cough, deep, slow, and heavy, vibrating through their chests. Every person there shuddered. They had all heard that cough for years, but the man who made it now lay in the ground. Ingha was thrown down again, this time flat on her back. One of the Lin ants cried out and rushed to help her up, but the instant her hands touched Ingha's shoulder, her fingers went numb, like touching solid ice. She recoiled in shock, her face draining of color. The attack lasted only seconds, but to everyone, it felt like an hour. When it was over, Ingha lay curled on the floor, her hair plastered to her sweat-drenched skin. Her eyes vacant. The bruise on her left wrist from Qingming had turned black, spreading wider, as though those ghostly fingers were still pressing deeper into her flesh. No one spoke. But no one doubted what they had seen. The chill still clung to their bones. From that night on, the family insisted on sending her away as soon as possible, convinced that as long as she stayed, no stars. Only a vast, swallowing darkness. In the courtyard, the camphor trees stood utterly still, their leaves unmoving, as if the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Inside, Ingha lay on her side, eyes closed, but her breathing was uneven. The clock read 2 a.m. From the hallway came the slow creak of the wooden floorboards, each step deliberate, drawing closer to her door. The door never opened, but a long shadow, shaped like a human form, stretched across the tiled floor, shifting with every footstep. Then, slowly, Ingha sat up. Her eyes remained shut, her head tilted slightly to one side, her lips parting without a sound. Like a puppet pulled by invisible strings, she rose to her feet and turned toward the door. Her bare feet slid across the floor with a dragging, skin-crawling sound. She walked down the dark hallway without touching the walls, without stumbling, her step steady, as if she had memorized the path. Each time she passed beneath a window's faint light. No one in the house knew she had left her bed, until the family's old dog let out a long, mournful howl. The sound startled an uncle sleeping in the room near the kitchen. Her head tilted back toward the empty sky. There was no moonlight, yet her face seemed faintly illuminated by a pale, bluish glow, seeping from the mist that curled around the tree's trunk. And in that mist, the shape of a man slowly came into focus. Thin, stooped shoulders, dripping hair, skin deathly pale, eyes sunken yet burning bright in the darkness. The uncle's breath caught in his throat. He saw the man's hand, rough, calloused, and unmistakable, gripping Ingha's left wrist. She stood there, dazed, making no effort to pull away, her lips moving faintly as though speaking to someone. He caught fragments of her voice. "I didn't mean to, please, forgive me." The man said nothing. He only bent closer, pressing his mouth near her ear, as if whispering something meant for her alone. Immediately, Ingha's body began to shake violently. Her eyes snapped open, wide. terrified, as if she had just realized a terrible truth. She tried to yank her arm back, but his grip held fast. The uncle wanted to shout, but his throat tightened like it was clamped shut. His feet felt rooted to the ground. Only when a sudden gust of wind rattled the wooden board stacked against the wall did he stumble backward. The noise woke the rest of the family. Her eyes fixed in horror on the base of the camphor tree, where no one now stood. But the air still reeked of damp wood, and the raw scent of a grave. As they led her back inside, everyone saw it. The purple bruises on her wrist had taken on a clear shape. A man's hand. The fingers extended upward toward her forearm, gripping as if they would never let go. For the rest of that night, even as they laid her in bed, her eyes remained open, staring at the ceiling. Her lips moved constantly, whispering a single name. Morning came under a sky the color of wet ash. The clouds hung so low they seemed to press down on the tiled roof of the Lin home. The courtyard was heavy with damp, cold air. Everyone in the house felt the weight of the day they would send Ing-ha away, ending all ties with the woman they believed had brought only misfortune. A few men from the family carried out wooden crates stuffed with her belongings. Clothes, cosmetics, bits of jewelry, all thrown together without care, just to finish the job quickly. No one spoke much. Every movement was brisk and cold. Ing-ha sat on the front steps, wrapped in a thick coat, her face drained of life. Her gaze stayed fixed on the ground. Her hands hidden in her sleeves, but anyone watching closely could see her left wrist, swollen and discolored. The blackened bruise had turned a sickly blue-gray. The branching veins like carvings etched into stone. Every time the wind swept through, she shivered, shrinking in on herself, as though feeling a chill no one else could sense. Her voice level but cold. Once you leave here, don't come back. The bond is broken. The duty is done. Don't try to tie yourself to this family again. The words weren't loud, but they silenced the entire courtyard. Ing-ha looked up, her eyes flickering between anger and helplessness. Her lips trembled as if she wanted to speak, but she pressed them shut and swallowed it down. Her uncle tugged her sleeve, motioning to the cart. She rose slowly, each step heavy, sounding almost like someone softly laughing. She froze, gripping the edge of her coat, her gaze hollow. Then, after a moment, she moved again, and never looked back. The cart rolled out the gate. Deliberate prayer, each word cutting the last thread between her son's spirit and the woman who had just left. The joss paper burned to ash, spiraling into thin wisps of smoke that the wind carried away. No one noticed the smallest wisp, breaking off, curling into the shape of a hand, before vanishing at the gate. On the cart, Ing-ha sat still, her head resting lightly against the wooden wall. She looked as though she might be sleeping, but her eyes were half open, staring out into the misty road ahead. No one saw the way her lips twitched then, as though swallowing a sob, or hiding a smile. After leaving the Lin family home, Ing-ha rented a small attic room on the edge of town, and always kept the door locked when she was home. But within a week, the quiet began to break. The first sign was the coughing. In the daytime, while she cooked or washed dishes, a deep, raspy cough would sound from the dark corner behind her. At night, it came from right beside her ear, snapping her awake in a cold panic. Sometimes, when she turned on the light, the bulb would flicker violently, then die, plunging the room into a thick, suffocating darkness. Then came the smell. Not the sharp, expensive perfume she wore, but the damp, rotting wood scent she knew too well, the scent that used to cling to Aquan's clothes after he came home from the workshop. It seeped into everything, her bedding, her wardrobe, the very walls. She washed and replaced everything, but within hours, the smell returned, stronger, heavier, as if it had risen straight from the earth. One evening, while she was eating, came a knock at the door. His face was indistinct, except for the deep, hollow eyes staring straight into hers. From that night, her sleep was shredded by nightmares. She dreamed of being bound, dragged across creaking floorboards in darkness, with nothing but Aquan's coughing and the groan of the wood beneath her. More than once, she woke to find fresh bruises on her neck and shoulders, shaped like fingers gripping hard. Neighbors began to notice. The landlady, an elderly woman, said she often heard slow, deliberate footsteps on the stairs at night, stopping right outside Ingha's door. Whenever she peeked out, the hallway was empty, but the mat outside the door was always wet. She felt the mattress sink beside her. The cold crept up her spine. She pulled the blanket over her head, but then a hoarse, heavy voice breathed right into her ear. "You think you can escape me?" The next morning, she stumbled out of the building with bloodshot eyes and unsteady steps, announcing she was leaving town immediately. But those who saw her swore that even in broad daylight, a shadow followed her that did not belong to the sun. Ingha left the boarding house on a gray, rain-lashed afternoon. The downpour stung her face like needles, but she hurried on, clutching her small suitcase. One thought pulsed in her mind: get out. Go as far as possible. The road to the bus station was deserted. Rain pooled into wide puddles, catching the flicker of dim, dying street lamps. Each time she passed through a patch of shadow, she felt someone walking behind her, footsteps slow and steady, matching her own. When she stopped, they stopped. When she moved, they followed. At the station, she chose the last row of seats, keeping her head down. The suitcase sat by her feet. Her fingers clamped so hard on the handle her knuckles went white. A sudden cold draft shivered through the station, making the fluorescent light above buzz and tremble. That smell, damp, rotting wood, drifted by again. She told herself it was only her mind. When the bus pulled out, the rain hadn't let up. Droplets smeared across the windows, warping the view outside. She closed her eyes, trying to drift off, until a hoarse cough sounded from the seat behind her. Her heart pounded. She turned slowly. The seat was empty. She exhaled and faced forward, but the window beside her now held a reflection. A thin man, hair dripping, was sitting right next to her. His breath was ice against her neck as he whispered, each word dropping like a stone. "You belong to me." She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the engine and the rain. But Ingha didn't move. Her head was tilted, eyes locked on the window. The driver approached, touching her shoulder, and jerked back. Her skin was frozen like ice. She slowly turned toward him. In another small town, people whispered about a young woman renting an attic room. She rarely spoke, rarely went out. At night, neighbors heard a deep cough from her room. Some swore they'd seen her standing motionless in the rain for hours, facing a patch of darkness, as if listening to orders from someone unseen. They never knew her name. "I just want to say one thing: thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen, not just to a story about a man and a woman, not just about a ghost, a cemetery, or a damp attic room, but about the bonds, both seen and unseen, that cling to us, no matter how far we try to run. You see, sometimes the scariest thing isn't what's chasing us, but what refuses to let us go. It could be a memory, a sense of guilt, a relationship, or a past we can't bury." Dinha left the Lam family home. She left the cemetery, the old room, but what she carried stayed right beside her, in every breath, in every cough she heard. And just like so many others out there, maybe you, maybe me, we leave a place, a person, a chapter of our lives, but never truly escape. Because if deep down you're still tied to the past, your feet will never carry you far. And sometimes, the thing pulling you back isn't something supernatural, it's you, looking over your shoulder. So remember this. If something makes you feel suffocated, if someone makes you fade away little by little, don't wait until you're dragged away. Take that step yourself, even if it's small. Because there are doors that, once closed, should never be opened again. And there are hands that, once they let go, you should never try to hold again. Thank you for listening to this story.